Hello, everybody. Welcome to the CAD Wizardry Academy. Thank you guys so much for being here. So this is my first live class on how to use Rhino. So I'm very excited. I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I am a jewelry designer, primarily working in CAD. Recently switched over to using just Rhino, and I've worked all over the industry. I started in estate jewelry, then I moved into custom jewelry for a little jewelry shop. Then I actually taught jewelry design for a while. Then I moved into mass manufacturing jewelry. Now I'm back to teaching. I've been all over the spectrum. So if you have any questions about anything, please feel free to ask. Eventually, I'm going to be launching a full CAD school, and I really want to focus on people making manufacturable jewelry, not just pretty jewelry. There's a lot of CAD stuff out there that is beautiful, but not necessarily can be manufacturable. I included a file in the comments. If you want yours to be the same color as mine, I'm going to go over the interface quite a bit, but Rhino is really nice because it is totally customizable. If you guys have just opened up Rhino for the first time, your screen is going to look a little bit different than mine. That's fine. You'll find that when you're using Rhino, eventually you'll figure out what buttons you like to use, where you like to have them. So it's a really fun, customizable software. Let's go ahead and get started. This is the Rhino interface that you'll see behind me. Yours might look a little different than mine, but if you want yours to be the same color as mine, go ahead and import that file that I've attached in the comments. It's pretty easy to get it to install to be like this color. So let me walk you through that real quick. In the top corner of the software, you'll see what we call the command line. If you just type in options import, all one word, no spacing, you'll get this little pop-up. And then wherever you've downloaded that file to, click on that file. You'll do select all, and then hit OK. That's how you can get it to be this color. Let's go over this interface a little bit. At the top, you'll find their usual drop-down menus for most softwares. You get your file, your edit, view, and then you'll find that you have these other titles that you might not be as familiar with. So we've got curves, surfaces, solids, meshes, dimensioning, transform, tools, analyze, render, panels, and help. These are nice because they're broken down by their type of object. Underneath that, you've got your command line. This command line is going to be your saving grace. If you're ever having problems like the computer's not responding to you, or your tool's not doing what you want, the command line is going to be that one place you can go to see what's going on. Because sometimes you'll try to start another command, but you wouldn't have realized you're already in something, and the command line will show you that. Underneath your command line, we've got these lovely little tabs here, and these are actually very similar to your drop down. One of the really wonderful things about Rhino is that there are multiple places to get the same tools. You can find the same tool under this curve drop-down menu as you can under this curve tab menu. And you can also find that same tool if you know the name of the tool, and you can type it directly into your command line. So there's multiple places to get tools, and you'll find your favorite places to find your tools. As you're clicking on these, you'll see that these buttons underneath here are updating. So these are going to be the buttons for the tools that are the same tools in the drop down menu. And if you hover over those tools, you'll see you'll get a little kind of cheat sheet about what each button does. And some of these buttons are going to have a right click function and a left click function. Don't be afraid of clicking on things in Rhino. You can click on things, and if you mess things up too much, there's always a way to kind of go back and reset everything, because you can accidentally delete tools and you can accidentally delete tabs, but you can always bring them back in. You're going to see on most of your screens, you're going to have this menu on the side here. I prefer to have my layout a little bit different, but again, this is completely customizable. So I actually like to have my stuff on the side here, and you can leave it on the side or you can put it back where it was, whatever you feel more comfortable putting it. Obviously, I've got a lot more layers here than you do, but I'm going to give you guys the link on how to get this interface. This section here, yours might look like this, which is, I think this is what it looks like when you first open up the software. There are several different tabs you'll see at the top here. Again, you can move these around. I like to have my layers tab as the first tab personally. A lot of you should have the properties tab, which is very helpful to have open. The help tab, especially if you are new to Rhino, I suggest you have this somewhere easily accessible and leave the auto update function on, because what will happen here is when you go to click on a tool, you'll see that as I click on the tool, it automatically updates with all the information you might need on that tool. So this is a lifesaver if you are new to any kind of CAD software. And it's nice because it'll update, and then once you're done with the tool, it'll leave that update there. But then if you go to click on a different tool, it'll update with that tool. So this help tab is really helpful. Go figure, right? So I recommend having this one open at least while you're getting started. I'm just going to drag that guy and drop him over here. It's very drag and drop. Most of the time I use the layer, the properties, and the help tab for when I'm doing things, because even though I've been using Rhino for 10 years, I don't know what all the buttons do. It can be a little overwhelming when you get started, but it's just one of those things where just don't be afraid to click on buttons to see what they do, because if they ruin everything, you can just hit undo. At the very bottom here, you're going to have another little section of toolbars, and these are called your snaps. And then underneath that, you've got a completely other section of toolbars. The wonderful thing about Rhino is that there are multiple places of getting everything. So if you forget one, there's probably another place to get it. So if you're not like me and you don't leave your layers toolbar open over here on the side, you can also get to your layers from the bottom. Next to that, we've got a couple of other snap tools. If you've just opened up your Rhino for the first time, I suggest clicking on this button called Smart Track and turning that off. I found that tool is really useful for architects, but it drives me up a wall when I'm trying to do jewelry with it. So I suggest turning that off. I also suggest right-clicking on Record History and clicking Always Record History and Update Children. To get to that, you right-click on that and then click on those two things. Let's talk about the main area that I've been ignoring. So this area here, this is going to be your main workspace. The areas are labeled. So you've got your top view, your front view, the right view, and then the perspective view, which is that three-dimensional view. Now, if you've never worked in CAD software before, sometimes the perspective view can get a little overwhelming, but it's just something that the more you practice with it, the more comfortable you'll feel looking and working in that view. If you double click on the name, it'll maximize that view for you. So I can make the front view, I can make the perspective view my main view. Be careful because you can really customize how this is laid out. So if you wanted to look at your perspective but still have your other views, you can mess with that. If you've accidentally done, that's okay. There is a button in here that will reset your views. All of these views are related. If I draw this box, you'll see that something is happening in every single view, which is really helpful. And your view is probably going to look like this right now if you are following along. As I move this object, you'll see it's moving in every single view. So everything is related. You're not looking at 4 different objects. You're looking at that same object in 4 different angles. In this little drop down area, you'll see there's a little arrow and you'll have what we call our shade modes. The first one is wireframe. I mostly don't model in wireframe. It confuses me, even though I've been doing this a long time. I prefer to work in some of these other views. This is the shaded view. You'll see that now this object has a little bit of heft to it, a little bit of substance to it. You can actually see your actual object. The render view, which is going to look really boring right now because there's nothing curved on here. Flat objects just don't render well. That's just a little tip for you. Flat objects don't look good in renders. This is the ghosted mode. I really like this mode because you can actually see through the object a little bit, but still get that three-dimensional feel to it. I use this mode a lot. Next, we have X-ray, which is Similar to ghosted, kind of similar to shaded. It's essentially shaded, but you can see through the object. Now these next ones, I kind of just used for fun. We've got the technical drawing, which as a box in technical drawing isn't very exciting. This one's, I'd say, used more for architecture. This is called artistic. This one is great if you want to trick people into thinking you know how to draw, because it essentially does a drawing and shades everything for you. So sometimes I'll do this one if someone wants a drawing and I'll be like, yeah, sure, here you go. And I'll just do a CAD for it real quick because I'm quicker at CAD than I am with drawing. So this is my cheat mode. The same with pen. This one also makes it look like I drew something, but I totally didn't. Arctic, I really like this one for seeing if my designs are going to be nice and smooth, because this one will show any weird bumps in your models. Okay, ray trace. I'm not going to click on ray trace because that one is the one that tends to mess with any of my live videos because it's kind of computer intense, but it's what you'll use when you want to do rendering. This render one is not very good. Ray trace is the one that does a better render. Now there are some other options in here. Some of these are a little bit more advanced, so we'll go over those in a later class. After this is over, feel free to click on stuff, move stuff around. This will update as you're doing things, so you can really play with things and don't be afraid of messing with stuff in CAD, because again, you've got that undo button. You can always undo. And if you can't figure out how to undo it, message me and I'll tell you how to undo it. I want to have us make a ring today. That's my goal. Now let's talk about the different types of objects. Curves. Curves are what the computer calls lines. So anytime you see a line on your screen or something that you've created that is just a single line, the computer is going to call that a curve. Even if it is a straight line, this is still called a curve. So that's how I will be referring to them. And you can see lovely over here. I'll make this a little bigger. My help is updating. So these are called curves. Next, we've got surfaces, which are going to be what the computer considers pretty much just a two-dimensional object. These objects, you could not take this surface and send it to a 3D printer and print it. The computer doesn't see this as something that can exist in reality, but it is something that you can use in here to make solid objects. Next, we have our actual solid tools. So with these buttons, if I actually draw this cube here, it will actually allow me to 3D print this. I could 3D print this right now. I don't know why I would, but I could. So if you wanted to, this is ready to go to a 3D printer. Selecting things. This object here, if you want to click on it, you can just left click on it. It'll grab it. If you left click and hold and drag to the left, you'll get these little dotted lines. If you left click and drag to the right, you get solid line. And these are going to do two different things. The dotted line is going to select anything that it touches. The solid line is going to select anything that it perfectly surrounds. So you'll notice when I've got my dotted line, it's grabbing this square that I've created. But when I do the same thing with the solid line, it's not grabbing it. I have to make sure I completely surround that object. If you want to move your construction plane around, then you right click on there and you'll get this little hand. So you right click and hold, and this will allow you to move these construction planes around, except for in the perspective view. If you right click and hold, it's going to rotate it around. But if you want to do the same thing, which is called panning in your perspective view, then you need to hold the shift button and right click on there, and that'll allow you to pan the perspective view. The next one here is going to be transform. This toolbar here is going to be anything that you can do to the object. For example, explode button, which is a really fun button because it looks like a little explosion. I've got this solid object right now. I can hit this explode button and it's going to change my object. I'm going to maximize my perspective view here. Now this is single surfaces. So I've altered my object from being a solid to being now several different surfaces. Anytime you want to do something to your object, you're going to want to go to these transform tools. The other thing we call these transform tools when I was teaching was the cool tools, because this is where all the cool tools are hanging out. The tools that'll allow you to actually change your objects are all hanging out under transform. So if you remember, I want to do something cool to my object, click on the transform button and you'll get the cool tools. Next, got your view tools. These ones are a little bit more advanced, aligning things into your different viewports. We got the display modes. This is another place where you can change these different viewports. So say if you wanted to go into your ghosted mode, you can also do that from this view tab. Construction planes. This is a little bit more advanced, so if you are still new to Rhino, I suggest you come to this tab later to play around. Different selecting options. You can select things different ways. Rhino is just amazing. You can select everything on your screen. You can deselect everything on your screen. You can select things by the color, but you can select by your different layers. So I can select everything on this layer. So this is cool if you've got a million things on your screen to help you select. This is your viewports, so you can change how your viewports are laid out. Again, everything is so totally customizable. Visibility, if you wanted to hide and show things on your screen. Mesh tools, render tools, things that are new in version 6. So some of you aren't going to have this button and some of you aren't going to have these tools. That's okay. You can still work in older versions. And then the drafting tools, which are things that will allow you to get measurements. So those are the different types of menus you have in here. I want to give you guys this file, which is this layout to make your construction plane be in millimeters, to make it smaller like this, which is about the size you need for jewelry, and also to give you all these different layer colors. These allow you to make objects in different colors, and then you can group things by their colors. You can make your different layers active just by clicking where this little check mark is and moving that check mark up and down. You can also, as long as it's not the active layer, you can actually hide everything on one layer. You can lock everything on one layer, which means I can no longer select this green object. We're going to be using layers and we're going to be using curves in just a minute to make our first ring. So download that file, and then I'm going to show you how to import or open that file and then save that as a template so that you can every single time open up in the correct template. Because Rhino can be used in all sorts of different industries. And because of that, you can model in feet, you can model in inches, you can model in millimeters for a small object, model in millimeters for large objects. You can even model in light years and parsecs. So you can actually make a 2-scale model of the universe in Rhino, which I recently learned, and that kind of blew my mind. The software is just so interesting what you can do with it. Once you've got that file downloaded, you can just go to File, Open, and then just go to where you have that file saved and just double click on it, just like a regular opening a file in any other software. And then you should open it and get pretty much what I have on screen. To save this as a template is very easy. You just come up to File, go to Save as Template, and then you can call it whatever you want. Pick a name that you're going to remember, and then you just go ahead and hit save. And then what that will do is when you open up a new file, you'll get the same pop-up that you've just seen. And if you've done it correctly, you should have that file saved here. So when you open it up, it'll always look exactly the same. So even if I come in here and really screw things up, let's say I delete a couple layers by mistake. I can really go in and kind of mess things up. That's fine. I can always come back in and do new, don't save it, and then reopen up, and everything is back where I wanted it. Definitely save this as your template. You can go in and alter it after you feel more comfortable editing things in Rhino, but this is a good template for you to always come back to. So now everybody's screens should look pretty similar to mine. The only thing it doesn't update is if you change the thickness of something. If I make this and then go file new, it stays where that is. So if you do something like that, yeah, you have to go back and manually adjust it back to about where you had it before. You'll notice at the top of most of your keyboards, you've got the F buttons. I want you to come up to your tools and options here and go to your keyboard. Under the F4 button, type in 0, 0, 0. So 0, 0, 0 represents the center of that grid. And then under the F5 button, type in exclamation mark underscore mirror. The reason you want to put this exclamation mark here is so that the computer knows that it's an English command, because Rhino can work in several different languages. And then the underscore just lets it know that, okay, it's English, and then what? And then the mirror command. These two buttons are going to save you a lot of time because you do a lot of these. And then once you have that done, then you can just hit OK. Now you've got mirror pre-programmed, which is something as a jeweler you will use all the time. And then that 0, 0, 0 just going to save you time so you don't have to type that every single time. Go back up to your tools, come to your options drop down, and then come to your mouse settings, which are near the bottom. And there's a little check mark here under selecting. You want to make sure that this button here, the turn on control points when selecting a curve, is turned off. So now that we've got that set up, I want us to make a ring. I'm going to show you a few steps that you can do just to make the simple band and also maybe making it a little bit more interesting. Just know that in Rhino, something amazing about it is that there are probably 6 or 7 ways of doing the exact same thing. Now that might sound a little overwhelming, but it actually works in your favor, especially as someone who is new to the whole thing. Let's say you've forgotten a tool and you want to do something. There's probably another tool you can use to get it to do the exact same thing. So never be afraid of clicking on the buttons and trying different things. Let's talk about rings for just a moment. When you're going to be making a ring, you want to know the ring size. Now, to know the ring size, if you're a bench jeweler, maybe you've got the millimeter memorized for every size ring is. I don't have that memorized. I have a couple of things saved to help me with it, but I also have one of these, which any jewelers is going to recognize, these lovely ring sizers. These plastic ones that I got these for $1 at a trade show somewhere actually have the ring size on one side. It's got the American size and I think the British size on one side. And then on the other side, it tells me what the millimeter is. So this 15.76, that is actually the millimeter size for a size 5 ring. But if you don't have one of these, you can always Google it. There are a ton of free charts out there. If you look at ring sizes in millimeters, there are a ton of charts that will show you what millimeter each ring size is going to be. There's multiple ways that you can get these numbers. So we're going to make a ring. Let's make a size 5, which is 15.76. Now, when you're thinking of making jewelry, I'm typically going to start with curves, which are just the lines. Then I'm going to make those curves and change them into surfaces. And then I'm going to take those surfaces and change them into a solid. Now, that isn't always the steps that you're going to go through, but I want you to be thinking about, basically, you're going to start with a curve, then move into a surface, then move into a solid. So that's a basic way to think about making a ring in CAD. I'm in my curves tab. I'm going to be clicking on this button right here. This button here is called Circle Center Radius. So what this tool does is it allows me to draw a circle from the center of the circle. Now you'll see on here that there are a bunch of other different circle tools, and you'll notice that some of the buttons have these little arrows on the bottom. If you click on that little arrow underneath the button, it's actually going to give you more tools related to that. So I'm using that circle center radius. Now, if you can't find the button for some reason, you can also find that tool under the drop down here. We've got all those same tools that you have in those buttons. So go up to your drop down under curves and go to the circle section. There's circle, center, radius. And if you forget that, you can just type in circle into your command line and it will give you that same circle. I like to mess with layers, and I have gone in and made some different layers here. I actually have a layer that I have named finger sizes. Now, layers are so cool if you really start to work with them. You'll notice that some of the layers have a name. Some of them are just called layer. If you double left click on the name, it'll allow you to change it. So I can call this cool layer 1. So you can change the name of your layers. So as you become more accustomed to CAD modeling, I suggest you really think about how you want your layers laid out and name them different things. Something to note about layers: if you just click on this and have it highlighted blue, that is not the active layer. It's just the layer that you have clicked on. If you want it to be the active layer, you need to make sure that little check mark has moved down to that layer. There's this little section here where you'll see there's always one check mark. If you click in that little section, it will move that check mark. If you don't have this layer, you can right click in the space here and you can add a new layer and you can call it finger 1. And if you click on the little square next to it, you can change the color. I suggest staying away from the magentas and some of the yellows because those are the color that things are when they're selected. I'm going to do finger sizes. If you're imagining a ring, like the through finger view, I'm going to recommend that you always make that your front view. This is how I model things. It makes rendering easier. It makes when you're going to send it to the 3D printer easier. And also it will help you start thinking about CAD in 3 dimensions as opposed to just 2 dimensions. So I'm going to recommend that whenever you're going to draw your circle that's going to represent your finger hole, that you draw it in the front view. So I'm going to come back up and grab that button. It's a little circle with a line coming out of the middle of it. You can grab it under the standard, under the curve tools. You can grab it under the curve drop down, circle center, or you can type it into your command line. But just get that circle however you want to. And then you're going to hit the F4 button. And if we programmed it right, you should see that circle has snapped to the center of your construction plane. And again, highly recommend drawing your finger hole in the front view. Oops, I just hit enter. If you hit enter, then it will just draw you a random circle and then you have to delete it. If you right click your mouse after using a command, it will reactivate that last command that I did. So when I accidentally drew the small circle, I can now right click. And if I look at my command line, it'll say center of circle because now I'm in a tool again. So I can try that again, F4, and then we are making a size 5. So this is going to be a 15.76, and you can type that directly in to the computer. And now you can see it's actually locked my circle. Doesn't matter what I do with my mouse. It's going to draw that at the exact size that I need it to be. And then I just hit enter and there's my circle. Now, if you don't have a specific measurement or placement that you want your circle, you can start that circle tool and you can just click anywhere on your screen and it'll start that circle. And then you can just click again and it'll draw whatever circle you want. But if you're doing a ring, always, always, always center your ring at that origin. You will thank me later. I've seen some people try to center maybe the gemstone at the origin, but that makes making the rest of the ring very complicated. So if you want to make your life easier, always center your finger at that origin mark. You guys have officially drawn something in CAD world. And if you maximize all your views, you'll see that you actually have that circle represented in every single view. And if you click on it, it highlights it in every single view. Now that you all have an object, I want to talk about this lovely little arrow grouping, which is going to be your best friend. This thing is called the Gumball. The Gumball isn't going to be there if you don't have the object clicked on. So highlight that object. If you don't have this, I'm going to show you how to turn it on. Come down to the very bottom of your screen. You can see where I'm flailing my mouse around down here. There should be a button called Gumball. If you don't have your Gumball on, it just means that it's accidentally been turned off. You can just left click on it and it'll turn it on. What this does is it makes modeling in the perspective view so much easier. If I had just clicked on this and dragged it around, I got really no control over where this is going. I can say, oh, okay, I want to put it over here and I wanted it to just move directly over to the side. But if I look at my other view, it's also gone to the side and the front. It used to be very difficult to model in the perspective view until Gumball came along. These arrows here will allow you to move your object in the direction of that arrow. Now you'll also notice that there are little grids. This is going to allow you to move it in 2 directions, but also keeping it flat. So right now it's allowing me to move it in the green and red arrow. This one's allowing me to move it in the blue and red arrow. This one's going to allow me to do the blue and green arrow. So the other thing on Gumball is rotate. It isn't going to show so much for this circle, but these little half arcs are going to allow you to rotate your object. Finally, these little squares will allow you to scale this object. Lots of different things you can do. You can see I've very quickly totally mutilated my circle, but that's fine. Right? The only way to learn what these things do is to go in and start messing with them. This little dot here allows you to actually go in and what we call an extrude, which is to make a surface from a curve. Gumball's fun. Play with Gumball because it'll change your life. We're going to make this ring with what we call a sweep, which is a surface tool. I'm going to change to this kind of orangey layer that's 2 above the finger sizes in the one I gave you. You can do everything in the same layer color if you want. I don't recommend it. I'm going to go to the standard and come to this thing called a polyline. It looks like a little arrow. It should be the 3rd button from the end. Click on that little arrow and get your little fly out. And we're going to grab this first line here called a single line. If you're having trouble finding it, come to your curve drop down, come to line, and grab that top one that says single line. I'm going to talk about snaps really quick. Here at the bottom of your screen, you've got these little buttons that say end, near, point, mid, center, T, PRP, tan, quad, not, vertex, and project and disable. These are your snaps. Make sure your O snaps are on. So this should be highlighted. And then also make sure your N, your mid, and your quad are turned on. And to turn it on, just click it so that there's a little check mark. And that will allow you to actually make things snap to each other. So when you draw things, they're actually touching mathematically as opposed to you trying to go in and do it without these. When I start my single line, notice that if I bring my mouse close to this circle, that it's actually pulling the center of my object towards the curve. And then the little word, this one is quad, if you can't see it, is popping up. So for example, if I turn off my snaps and I really zoom in here, if you use that center wheel, it will actually allow you to zoom in and out on things. And I'm like, okay, that has to be spot on. If I keep zooming here, look, I'm like way off. It is probably pretty unlikely that without snaps, you'll be able to draw something that is directly attached. But these snaps will do that work for you. So I can right click to start my line again. And now you can see that I'm getting my little snap. It's actually snapping up there. It's highlighting what it's snapping to. Now I'm going to actually come into my right view. I was in my front view. Now I'm in my right view. And I'm going to make sure I'm getting a snap at the bottom of my circle. And I'm going to go ahead and click. Now I want to draw your attention back up to the command line, which is this area up here, because there are lots and lots of little options under here. I want you to come up here and I want you to click on this option that says both sides. So right now, if you look at my curve, it's just drawing it in one direction. If I come up and click on both sides, then it's going to draw it on both sides. Now, if I want this to be perfectly flat, I could try and draw it perfectly flat, but it's not going to work. We've got this lovely option. If you hold your shift key, what it does is it turns on ortho, which means that it is going to snap to the 45 degree. We're just going to pick an arbitrary size right now. You could enter in a number. So let's say you wanted this to be 2 millimeters wide total. You would put in half of that. So I would put in 1 millimeter and it'll lock it to that. Just kind of pick an arbitrary space, hold that shift key down, and then click. I'm going to leave all of my views open so you can see what's happening, but if it's easier for you, just keep that right view open. We're going to use another curve tool here. We are going to draw ourselves an arc. It looks kind of like a little slice of a pie. This is the tool we're going to use right now to draw ourselves a little arc. If you can't find it there, remember, you can always come down to your drop downs and we're going to do center start angle. What to do next? For every single button, it will usually tell you what you're supposed to be doing. The command line up here is telling me that I want the center of my arc. The center of that is going to be the very center of the curve that we just drew. I'm going to come in. I've got my mid snap on. Get a mid snap there. Next, it's going to say, what is the start of my angle? The start of our angle is going to be another end snap here, and it's going to be the very end of our line. Now you can see it's allowing me to draw an arc. I'm going to have all my views open so you can see. You want to actually take your mouse and drag it underneath that circle and get an end snap at the other end of your curve. If you go above, it's going to draw that arc at the top, which is not what we want. We want this arc to come underneath and be the bottom. Right now, I've got 2 open curves. We're going to come back up to our transform menu, and we're going to use this little button here that looks like a little puzzle piece. This is join. What this is going to allow me to do is to take these 2 open curves and actually join them together. So you can start this tool by either having nothing selected, grabbing the join tool, and then clicking on the 2 curves you want to join up, or you can grab both of those curves to start with and then hit the join tool. Either one is fine. So this curve is now what we're going to call a profile. And this is going to be called the rail. We're going to use a tool called a sweep. What I want you to think about is I have this shape. This shape is the cross section of my ring. If I were to take a ring and cut that ring in half and then dip that ring in a little ink and then stamp it on a paper, this is the shape that I'm going to get. So think about it as that cross section of your ring. The rail is the path that we want the rest of the ring to take. Under your surface tools, we are looking for this button right here. This button is called Sweep One Rail. It's got a little 1 next to it. Now, follow the command line. It'll always tell you what to do next. And if you set up your curves properly, then this is going to be a piece of cake. So I want you to select the rail. The rail is always the path that you want the object to take. So our rail curve is going to be our ring because we want this to be a circular shape. After you click on that, it's going to ask you for your cross section. Remember, that's our profile. So I'm going to click on my profile. You can hit the enter button. After that, you're going to get this lovely little arrow. It doesn't really matter for this one, but this is going to be the seam. So whenever you think of a seam, think of your sleeve. There has to be some area where that sleeve comes together. That's the seam. That is what this little arrow is telling you, that this is where your seam is going to be. Then I'm going to hit enter and I'm going to get this. That's pretty much all I want. So I'm going to hit OK. And guess what? We just made a ring. You guys just made your first ring. We used circle, line, arc, join, and sweep. 5 tools, and you have made a ring. You can send this to a 3D printer. You can get it cast, and you can have a ring. Now, if you want to make it a little cooler, grab that little profile here, and as long as you've had your history on, then you can hit F10, and it'll turn the control points on. So these are little dots that'll allow you to change the shape of your curves, and you can come in and change the shape. Look, I've just made a totally separate ring. This is a completely different ring now, just by taking these little dots, which are called control points. I turned them on by hitting F10 on my keyboard. You can click on them and you can drag them up, and you have just made a second ring. We just made 2 rings in what, 10 minutes? Isn't that fun? Congratulations, guys. You have made your first ring. You should be so proud of yourselves. This is something very exciting. Once you've got that up, remember you can come to this little drop down here, grab that render. Oh, ooh, gorgeous. Look at what you did. Look at what you did. You should be very proud. I love CAD, so I really want everybody to be able to do it and to have as much fun as I have doing this. Okay? All right, guys. Well, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your Wednesday. Stay safe out there. And I will see you guys next time. Bye.